When President Emmerson Mnangagwa's biggest challenge will be rebuilding the economy. The Constitutional Court has just 14 days to deal with the MDC Alliance's case bid to nullify the elections. With us to talk about the current state of our northern neighbour is our political reporter Mbali Thethani, who is out in Harare. Mbali, a very good afternoon to you. Do give us the latest on, of course, what's happening around that side, knowing full well that, of course, this matter is now finally going to court, and the MDC just has 14 days alongside the respondents to make their case heard to the Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe.
Well, that's right, Alicia. It is, of course, business as usual here in Harare. And this is, of course, after the MDC filed an application yesterday at the Constitutional Court nullifying the results of the elections. And, of course, right now here in Zimbabwe, we do know that they were expected to hold the inauguration of the incoming President Emmerson Mnangagwa. But, of course, now we do know that will not taking place. And this is, of course, of the Constitutional Court application that was filed by the MDC. But I must say, much earlier on this morning, we were expecting the Zanu-PF party to outline in terms of that they did indeed receive this court challenge that was brought forward by the MDC. We attended their press briefing earlier today, and they did not give us much information. But the only thing that they were telling us was, of course, the two specific events which are expected to take place much later on next week, and that is, of course, on Monday and Tuesday. Zimbabwe will see two public holidays. Of course, it is the Heroes Day and as well as the Defence Forces Day, and they're saying that those two specific events will be going ahead instead of this inauguration, which was expected to take place. And they were basically calling on people of the Zimbabwe nation to come forward on those specific days and celebrate with the Zanu-PF party. But just looking at the mood of Harare, we did do a drive-by here in this specific area. It is quite somber. People are just going about their normal day. We did also pass by the offices of the presidency's offices, and we did see a motorcade parked outside those offices. And once we asked some of the officials who were at that specific office, we tried to get information about where is the president right now, and they were actually saying that he is inside his offices, but we were not sure if whether they were discussing this inauguration, which was expected to take place, or whether they were actually discussing these two holidays that Zimbabwe will see much later on. But Alicia, politics aside, we do know that building up to this election here in Zimbabwe, one thing Zimbabweans were adamant on changing was the state of Zimbabwe's economy. Now joining us is, of course, a Sunday Times chief bureau here in Zimbabwe. His name is Ray Ndlovu. Now, Ray, we do know that something that Zimbabweans are looking at changing in this specific country is the state of the economy. We've seen this MDC challenge taking it to the Constitutional Court. Do you think that it will impact investor confidence coming into Zimbabwe?
Well, I think definitely there is going to be some sort of continuation of the wait-and-see approach that has characterized the run-up to this election, and obviously this as well prolongs for investors or for people who intend on coming to Zimbabwe their wait-and-see approach to see what the outcome is going to be of the court challenge. And we do know that the Constitutional Court has 14 days to make a ruling, and the ruling is final. So for many people who are outside Zimbabwe, specifically investors, they will be watching quite closely to see and hoping that there will be a finality to the issues around the politics in the country.
Once the new president comes in and this new administration comes in, what do you think should be their priority in terms of the economy?
I think from all the presidential candidates that we saw contesting for the elections, the main theme was around the economy, and in particular when you narrow it down to Zanu-PF and to the MDC Alliance, they also were zeroing in on the economy. There are concerns of Zimbabwe attracting foreign direct investment because the country does need foreign direct investment because for years it has been starved of new money coming into the country. So there's definitely a need to attract foreign capital. there's definitely a need to go to the International Monetary Fund, to the World Bank, and to try and sketch out a deal in terms of, working out some sort of payment for the country's arrears, which stand at about $10.2 billion at the moment. So those are some of the issues that a new administration has to grapple with. And of course, for ordinary citizens, some of the quick wins that they would want to see are issues to do with cash, having availability of money within the banks, and being able to go into banking institutions or to go to ATMs for that matter to be able to access cash. So those are some of the long-term challenges or the long-term things that a new administration has to deal with, while at the same time it will have to deal with the short-term things that ordinary Zimbabweans really are looking forward to seeing resolved.
One thing that we've also noticed here in Zimbabwe, there is the use of the US dollar, there is the use of the rands, and some of the people here don't actually trust the bond notes being issued here at the banks. How long do you think it will take in terms of Zimbabwe getting their own currency once again and getting it to work?
I think the issue of the currency in Zimbabwe is an issue of largely, while there are market forces at play, it's also an issue of confidence. I think the issue where we see people not having trust in the local unit, the bond note that you make reference to, is an issue of confidence, because the background to this story and to these events is hyperinflation and really a lot of people losing quite a lot of money during the time of hyperinflation. So it's an issue of confidence. Once the right measures are put in place, in terms of boosting confidence, investors start trickling in, agriculture starts working, the manufacturing industry, starts to produce. Those are the kind of issues and the kind of things that are able to provide the confidence which ordinary Zimbabweans need, and we could see a move towards the adoption of a currency of its own. But of course, I don't think the indications that we've read from Zanu-PF and the president-elect is an intention to quickly run towards the issuing of a new currency, as it were, a local Zimbabwean dollar unit at this point in time, because there are quite a lot of things that need to be fixed, whereas the MDC Alliance has said once it does come into power, they would not hesitate to adopt the rand and use the rand as part of the multi-currency system that's been in place for almost 10 years now.
One thing we've also noted is the international developments, and we've seen America saying that they will not lift the sanctions in Zimbabwe. From your perspective, do you also think that this is a vote of no confidence from America?
I think the Americans were very clear from the onset in terms of the reforms that they expected. They indicated what they would like to see well before the election took place, and it was really an issue of having the ball in Zimbabwe's court and making sure that things were done or they could meet those standards. But it's very worrying at this point in time that sanctions are not going to be lifted, and we've seen some very strong editorials coming from US publications over the last week, I think from the Wall Street Journal, from the New York Times as well in the UK. All these really having a stern approach in terms of the current administration or the events that have been taking place in Zimbabwe, and really showing that there's not going to be a bending over backwards, in terms of what would have been expected, what has been hoped to have been achieved by the current administration that was in office. So I think the sanctions issue is definitely going to see a continuation of the pain that Zimbabwe has gone through for almost the last 20 years, and it's going to be a huge and a tall order for the new and incoming administration to deal with in terms of meeting the reforms and the requirements that the US, because most of these places are where the financial capital is, where Zimbabwe needs to attract the money to get the economy running once again.
There are millions of Zimbabweans not currently living in Zimbabwe, they're in diaspora. From your perspective, what role can they play in terms of trying to rebuild and help rebuild this economy?
I think their skill set is required in Zimbabwe. They need to be able to make the decision whether they will be prepared to come back home. That's obviously a decision that will entail a lot of movement on their part. But again, they've got access to networks, they've got access to to some of these centers which an administration might not necessarily be able to knock on and be heard immediately, but they have those links. They've been there in the diaspora for many years, so they have got access to those markets. So there is a need to engage the diaspora community, to have them coming in on board and also helping to rebuild the economy, because clearly it's not going to be something that can be achieved by one single entity. I think it requires all Zimbabweans at the end of the day to be able to work together to work and see that the country's economy gets running back to where it was, and even better than that.
Thank you very much, Ray. And of course, that was Ray Ndlovu. He is a business writer for the Business Times, and as well as the chief bureau for the Sunday Times here in Zimbabwe. He's just giving us a brief background in terms of the task that the new administration will have to deal with. And of course, one thing in particular is trying to resuscitate Zimbabwe's economy. It's back to you in studio.
If you can hear me just before I let you go, I mean, we know that you were part of a media briefing that was hosted by Zanu-PF a little while ago. If you can just quickly give us some of the most important pointers that came out of that briefing, because we did miss it from this side.
Well, Alicia, as I said much earlier, we did try and pose the question of whether the Zanu-PF party did indeed receive papers from the MDC Alliance, obviously contesting the issues coming out of the elections, saying that they have nullified these results. They're saying that the numbers from this election for them as the MDC Alliance does not make sense. When we tried to address that specific issue, we were then told that we would rather deal with the Zanu-PF legal team. So the only thing that was communicated to us from that Zanu-PF press briefing was the issue around the 2 public holidays that Zimbabwe will see on Monday and on Tuesday.
But when it comes to the submissions that were put in by MDC leader Nelson Chamisa there, we know that, of course, it was the whole issue of the numbers. But has he fingered the ZEC in terms of how they actually conducted the whole electoral process? Because a lot of it has been to blame the way that the ZEC actually conducted the electoral process in Zimbabwe. Many saying that the ZEC has actually got vested interest in the Zanu-PF.
Yes, that's right, Alicia. They did single out that in the court documents, and they also singled out the issue around the numbers after the elections.
All right, Mbali, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. That is our reporter out in Harare, Mbali Thethani, and she was joined by the bureau chief in Zimbabwe, and they were also looking at the economic stance as to what could happen economically by the delay in the election of the new president.